Hello, this is Brian Friese with Ag Perspective. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to watch our 2014 Farm Bill video analysis. For those of you that watched the video we had posted online a year ago, this will be very similar, except we'll go into more detail on some specifics that we didn't know about a year ago. Once again, a special thank you to Dr. Carl Zulauf of Ohio State University. Dr. Zulauf works with us as a consultant to help us better understand the Farm Bill, so we can in turn help you better understand the Farm Bill. Alright, the 2014 Farm Bill, what's it cover? It covers the 2014 through 2018 crop years. For corn and soybeans, the crop year runs from September 1st through August 31st. So it's important to understand that even though we're in calendar year 2015, we're still actually in the 2014 crop year. As I'm sure you're well aware, direct payments, the ACRE program, the SURE program, and the countercyclical program have been eliminated. However, the marketing loan program remains. Loan rates vary by county, but the numbers that you see there on the screen are a general representation of the approximate area where loan rates are. So once again, those are the same as the 2008 and 2002 Farm Bills. Alright, some new programs added. ARC, PLC, and SCO. ARC stands for Agricultural Risk Coverage, and it is an FSA program, program administered at your local farm service agency. PLC stands for Price Loss Coverage. It too is administered at your local FSA agency. SCO stands for Supplemental Coverage Option. It is actually something a little bit different in that it is a crop insurance product that is sold and serviced by licensed crop insurance agents. Alright, ARC and PLC. Getting a lot of press right now. The reason being is you have to choose between one or the other. It's a one-time irrevocable decision that covers the life of the Farm Bill, so it's very significant. Payments for both ARC and PLC are made in accordance with your farm's base acres, not what you actually are going to be planting that year. The reason why they make the payments on base acres, which are an historical look at what you've been planting, is so that the Farm Bill stays in compliance with the World Trade Organization. The WTO does not like any farm policy that could sway what a farmer is going to plant in any given year, give them an artificial reason, the way they look at it, to plant a certain crop over another crop. So for that reason, the farm programs look at the historical plantings, not what you're actually planting that year. Your total base acres for farm will not change. So if you have a farm that has 100 acres of base, but it's actually 120 tillable acres, there's nothing you can do about that. You cannot increase the total base acres on your farm. You can, however, reallocate base acres by looking at your 2008 through 2012 plantings. So for instance, if you can reallocate acres, corn base, you're going to want to take a look at doing that. Essentially anything you can do that can increase your corn base, your wheat base, and then your soybean base in that order typically makes sense to do. If you have any specific questions on that, we'd be happy to help you out. ARC, if you choose ARC, it also has an individual or a county option. So if you choose ARC, you have another decision to make. For most of my presentation, I'm going to focus the discussion on ARC around the county option because I believe the individual option to be more of a niche type of fit, and we'll discuss that briefly at the end. The ARC or PLC decision is done on a commodity by commodity basis by FSA farm number. So what that means is that you could have in an FSA farm number, you could have one crop be enrolled in ARC and the other in PLC, or vice versa. And also, you could also have one farm number enrolled in ARC and another farm number enrolled in PLC. One exception to this rule is the ARC individual option. If you choose that option, all commodities in the farm number must be ARC. For both programs, payments are made on 85% of your base acres. Once again, ARC Individual being an exception, it only pays on 65% of base acres. That's one of the reasons why ARC will be more of a niche, because if you choose ARC Individual, you automatically take a 20% cut in your pay compared to ARC County or PLC. Payment limits: $125,000 per individual, $250,000 per married couple. Corporations and LLCs are generally one payment limit. This has been the same in the most recent farm bills as well. So if you farm as a corporation, even though you might be the corporation might be owned by husband and wife, generally that's just qualifies for one payment limit at the FSA office. However, partnerships have the ability to qualify for more payment limits. That's oftentimes one of the reasons why people have organized farm partnerships. And those would be handled similar to how they have been in the past. So if your entity qualified for 4, your partnership qualified for 4 payment limits in the past, there's no reason why that shouldn't still qualify for 4 payment limits. Now that's something though you're going to want to verify with your local farm service agency. Both ARC and PLC are free to the grower. Alright, let's take a look at the big picture, ARC versus PLC. ARC is what they call shallow loss coverage, whereas PLC is what they call catastrophic coverage. I think this sliding scale will show you kind of what that looks like. ARC, as it pertains to the 2014 crop year, will start to pay with average yields in the county at $4.55. Now that $4.55 number is what is called a national average market year cash price. So this isn't like crop insurance that sets its prices over a 1-month average. These programs set their price over a 1-year period. And it's not just simply a board of trade price, it's actually a cash price that the government computes. So it's a 1-year average cash price. So if that price falls below $4.55, ARC will start to pay, and then it'll max out its payment down here around $4. Whereas PLC does not start to pay till $3.70, but it'll cover all the way to whatever the county loan rate is, which in Lee County, Illinois is $1.97. Once again, that'll vary by county though. So as you can see, PLC covers a lot bigger band than ARC, but it doesn't kick in nearly as soon. So this is why they call ARC shallow loss coverage, and why PLC is looked at as more of catastrophic coverage. Let's take a look at the same concept as it applies to soybeans. Soybeans, for the 2014 crop year, that's the crop that we just harvested, $10.55 with average yields it'll start to pay, maxes out around $9.30. PLC, on the other hand, does not start till $8.40, but covers all the way down to loan rate. Same concept as we looked at with the corn. Alright, now that we've kind of looked at the big picture, let's dig into each one of these products and then we'll compare them head to head. So we'll talk about the ARC County option. ARC County is what they call revenue protection. So the payment happens when crop revenue is lower than the ARC guarantee. Crop revenue is your actual county yield times that market year price that I discussed. That's crop revenue. Then ARC guarantee is your county's benchmark yield times the benchmark market year price times 86%. So what is a benchmark yield and price? Well, it is an average of 5 years excluding the high and the low. So for instance, the benchmark yield would be the last 5 years yields in your county throughout the high yield, throughout the low yield, average the remaining 3, and that's the benchmark yield. Same concept is true with benchmark market year price. And obviously the benchmark market year price will be the same for all growers across the country. One thing I think it's important to mention in the discussion of ARC, because sometimes these programs get compared with crop insurance, And one of the things we talk about oftentimes in crop insurance is the harvest revenue option, also known as the harvest price option. The harvest revenue option is very important because if you don't have it, a decrease in yield can be offset by an increase in price. So take a year like 2012 in corn. We had a drought, corn yields were low, but prices took off. So without the harvest revenue option, that decrease in yield can be offset by the increase in price. So in crop insurance, if you didn't have that in 2012, that was a bad deal. However, ARC, as we're illustrating here, does not have that option. But that's why we look at ARC and PLC as price protection products, not so much yield protection products. And that's really what they're designed to do. And when we compare to PLC in a little bit, it too only pays with low prices. So when you're looking at ARC and PLC head to head, the fact that ARC does not have a harvest revenue option is not significant. But when you're comparing ARC to, let's say, crop insurance, the fact that it does not have a harvest revenue option is very significant. So I think this is just one of the many reasons why ARC would not be a good replacement for crop insurance. All right, let's go through an example. Lee County, Illinois. The benchmark yield is 170. The benchmark price is $5.29. That's rounded. It's actually about $5.28 3/4. Times 86% comes up with a ARC guarantee for the county of $772.91. So if the actual yield is 170 bushel per acre, any price below $4.55 is going to trigger a payment. And you arrive at that number simply by taking $772.91 divided by the actual yield. Like in this case, we said where actual yield is going to equal average. So anything in that scenario triggers $4.55 and below triggers a payment. If, however, the actual yield comes in at 180, and you do that math, it's going to take a price below $4.29 to trigger a payment. And that's probably more realistic for the year that we had in 2014. Just to give you the illustration, if the actual yield were to come in at 10 bushel below average, the trigger would bump up to $4.83. That's how you can kind of see the relationship between price and yield. It's important also to understand, as we discussed, ARC is shallow loss coverage. This means that it has a maximum payout per acre, and that maximum is equal to 10% of the benchmark revenue. The benchmark revenue is simply 170, the county average yield, times 529 times 10%. So in Lee County, Illinois, the maximum ARC payment for 2014 is $89.87 per acre. At the max payment, and also factoring in that you only get paid on 85% of your base acres, it would take 1,636 acres of corn to hit the $125,000 payment cap. So if you are a spousal entity and you qualify for 2, you could double that number. Alright, for those of you that work with us in crop insurance, you've seen charts like this before. These are what we do with our what-if scenarios. And benchmark price at $5.29, 170 is the yield, 86%. Multiply all those together and you come up with a revenue guarantee of $772.91. As we said, the max payout per acre is $89.87. Trigger price then $4.55. Alright, here's our what-if scenarios. Our current estimate of the market year price is $3.90. Now that's a little higher than the government's forecasting. The current government forecast for that market year price is $3.73. But there are some others, some universities, some different stuff we've looked at that are forecasting more in the lines of where we are and possibly even higher. Now, once again, this price isn't finalized till August 31st, so it's a guesstimate at this point. So using the $3.90 and assuming that Lee County is 10 bushel above county average yield this year, the payout in Lee County, Illinois would be $70 an acre, $70.91. If Lee County happened to come in at 190, the payout would be $31.91 an acre. Alright, that's corn. Now let's take a look at soybeans. Benchmark yield's 53.7, price is $12.27 times 86%, sets a guarantee of $566.15. If the actual yield comes in at average, anything below 1055 triggers a payment. For 5 bushel above, it's going to take $965, and 5 bushel below would take $1163. Once again, maximum pay, 10% of benchmark revenue. You do that math, maximum payment comes out at $65.89 per acre. Looking at the same kind of what-if chart that we looked at in corn, our current market year-to-date estimate for soybeans is 1020. This means that if Lee County comes in at 53.7, payout's going to be $18.91 per acre. Alright, that was ARC. Now let's take a look at PLC. PLC once again stands for price loss coverage, and it is price protection. It's actually a little simpler concept than the ARC is because you're just looking at one variable, price. So for corn, the reference price that the Farm Bill sets for PLC is $3.70. For soybeans, it's $8.40. For wheat, it's $5.50. The payment, if there is a payment, is the payment rate times the payment yield. The payment rate is simply the difference between the reference price and the market year price. So for instance, if the corn price, the national average market year cash price for corn for that crop year were to come in at $3, that means the payment rate would be 70 cents. The payment yield then is simply your farm's, not the county's, but your farm's historic average yield as you have reported it to the FSA office. Now you have a choice with regards to this payment yield. You can either leave the yield in place that the FSA office currently has for your farm, or you can update it. And if you update it, they're going to allow you to use 90% of your 2008 through 2012 average. Now, I think it's important for everybody to turn in yields. Even though you may not choose PLC, I think it's important to turn them in. The reason being that for some of your farms, the last time that yield was updated was 1986. So by turning in yields, even though you have to take just 90% and you take a 10% haircut on your 2008 through 2012 average, oftentimes that's still better than the yield that's on that farm from 1986. The exception to this would be if you are in the acre program. If you were in the acre program, you've likely already turned in these yields, and the government will just simply do that math on the yields that you've already turned in. It's important when we're talking about PLC to also mention that crop insurance product that I mentioned called SCO, Supplemental Coverage Option. The Supplemental Coverage Option is an insurance product that is only available to those purchasing PLC. It is a county insurance plan that covers from the grower's level up to 86%. If you carry an 80% crop insurance policy, you could qualify for up to 6% of SCO coverage. And I think it's important that you understand that the SCO coverage is based on county yields, not your own yield. So in a case like this, you'd have an 80% policy that's covering your individual farm, and then you'd have a 6% policy that's based off of the county yields and not your own. If you carry an 85% crop insurance policy, you'd qualify for 1% of SCO coverage. Carry a 90% crop insurance policy, there would be no SCO coverage available to you. It is available here in 2015. And our general opinion is that this product should have little to no bearing on your PLC versus ARC decision. We think you should look at PLC and ARC head to head, choose which product you think is best for your farm and your farm number, and then if PLC is the answer, then take a look at SCO to see if it also is something that would be valuable to your farming operation. That's just our general opinion. Alright, let's look at the what if chart for PLC. So here we're looking at Lee County, Illinois soybeans, and once again the reference price is $3.70, so no payments till we fall below $3.70, and at $3.50 it's $34 an acre, and as you can see it keeps climbing. If you recall back to the ARC what if scenario, it maxed out. As we talked about, it maxed out at about $89 an acre in Lee County. Well, PLC doesn't do that. It'll keep increasing all the way down to the county loan rate, which we said was $1.97. So at about $3.15, the PLC prices, the PLC payments, will exceed the ARC payments. Same concept here in beans. Reference price $8.40, no payments till we fall below $8.40. Those payouts will keep increasing all the way down to the county loan rate. Now, let's look at the two products head to head. So what I have on the top is the ARC chart that I showed earlier, and underneath of it I have the PLC chart. If we said that we thought market year cash prices were going to be around $3.90, as you can see, Lee County, Illinois, and most counties in the Midwest are going to show a very substantial ARC payment in 2014. However, PLC, obviously, since $3.90 is not below $3.70, shows nothing. And once again, by the time you get down to about $3.15, somewhere right in the middle here, is where PLC starts to win. And if you get down to $3, definitely $3 and lower, definitely PLC is going to pay more per acre than ARC is. So let's kind of dissect this decision a little bit and kind of review. As we just illustrated, ARC's going to pay sooner, $4.55 versus $3.70. One thing we have not mentioned yet is that the ARC guarantee will move lower if prices trend lower. So here's an illustration of this. So what this chart is revealing is it's showing the market year prices going back to 2009. So these are the 2009 through 2013 market year prices. Then over here in this column, it shows the numbers that are actually used in that benchmark formula. And as you can see here in 2009, the price was $3.55, but what actually gets used in the formula is $3.70. So the minimum number, the minimum value that can go into the ARC benchmark formula is $3.70. That's one of the ways that ARC is preventing the prices from completely going lower if the prices trend lower. You know, with PLC, it's a statutory value. $3.70, it would literally take an act of Congress to change the $3.70 value. Whereas with ARC, since it's based on a 5-year average, that number is going to fluctuate from year to year. And if prices trend lower, it'll pull that number down. So one of the ways they've put kind of a governor on this is they have made it a minimum in that formula, $3.70. So instead of $3.55 going into the benchmark formula, they put in $3.70. So then if you take the benchmark average of these 5 values, throw out the high, $6.89, throw out the low of $3.70, average the remaining 3 values together, it comes up with an Olympic average of $5.29. As we mentioned, with ARC, you multiply that times 86%, that's the deductible, and you come up with an effective price of $4.55 assuming average yields. That is in comparison to the PLC effective price of $3.70. Now let's make an assumption when we do some what-if scenarios. Let's say that through the life of the farm bill, prices just tend to drift lower. And instead of some of these higher values that we have in these back years, we're forced to use these 370 values. So what you'll see is that in the second year of the Farm Bill, the price remains unchanged, and the reason for that is that now you're averaging these 5 numbers together. 2009 falls off, and 2009 was the low value being excluded before, and now 2014 will be the low value being excluded. So in effect, you'll be averaging the same 3 numbers together. So for years 1 and 2, that price will not change no matter what happens in 2014 in terms of low prices. But by 2015, we now have to include the 390 because the 370 will be the throwout, and that's going to lower us to 486. And as you can see, by the end of the Farm Bill, we could drift all the way down to 377 if a scenario like this played out. And then by the time you multiply that times 86%, your effective price for ARC could end up being considerably lower than your PLC effective price. So in this scenario, even though we started out with ARC considerably above PLC's effective price, if this scenario played out, by the end we could be considerably below. So that's something that one definitely has to be aware of when they're making this decision, since it is a 5-year decision you are making. Alright, so a little bit more of review. The ARC annual guarantee can also move higher if prices trend higher. The scenarios that I just showed there were all prices moving lower, but if for some reason prices took off and went higher, that ARC effective price could go higher as well. As we mentioned, PLC will pay more no matter what when prices fall below 315. ARC also has the per acre payment cap. But one thing to consider, PLC has no per acre cap, but for a larger farmer it effectively does because of overall payment limits. So that's one thing one has to consider as well. PLC might come to a point where it could pay out $200 per acre, but if you've already hit the payment max at $89 per acre, which was similar to ARC, does it really matter that PLC is paying $200 per acre? So the size of your farm and how close you are to the payment limits is something that you also have to consider. The bottom line is that this decision requires careful thought and analysis. So I often get asked, Brian, what would you do, or what are you doing on your small farming operation? Well, from a risk management standpoint, I do like the PLC product. And the reason I like it is because it doesn't have that per acre cap. So it does a better job, as we've illustrated, protecting from a catastrophe. So if corn goes to $3, $2.75, which we would all consider a catastrophe, PLC is going to do a better job protecting your risk. However, it is very, very difficult to pass up the first year payment that ARC offers. So as I've looked at the program for my own farming operation, I chose to go with the ARC accounting option. It was just too hard for me to pass up the bird in the hand. As the old adage goes, what's better, the bird in the hand or the 2 in the bush? However, I could definitely make an argument why one would also want to consider PLC. But I do believe over the life of the Farm Bill, from a statistical standpoint, I believe that ARC County definitely has the ability, and from a statistical standpoint, probability standpoint I should say, will probably pay out more per acre than PLC. However, I think it's just very, very important that one realizes that if prices were to fall, below $3.15, especially below $3, that PLC would have definitely been the better decision. All right, let's look at the same concept in soybeans. Kind of look at the two head-to-head. As we said, for 2014 crop year, 1020 is what we're looking at. And one thing you'll notice in beans is that there's a bigger spread between the current ARC effective price with average yields, which you said was 1055, and where PLC kicks in, which is 840. I think for this reason, the decision between ARC and PLC for soybeans is perhaps a little bit easier one than corn. And I think that it'll be an easier decision for people to pick ARC County on soybeans. Because ARC's got that 1055 versus 840. but just like with corn, you have to remember that our annual guarantee will fluctuate. It's going to take prices below $7.20 on soybeans for PLC to pay more, and that can certainly happen. But I don't think it's going to happen, obviously not in crop year 1. And even if it happens in later crop years, I believe that you'll have collected enough in the earlier crop years on the ARC County to offset what you might be getting more, where you could be getting more in PLC in the end. And I think it's perhaps an easier decision than the corn to go with the ARC County on the soybeans. Alright, ARC individual coverage, where does it fit? Essentially, I think it fits where you might have a high-risk farm. And ideally, if all of your high-risk farms are organized into one farm number, I think it would be a better fit. So what would be a high-risk farm? It would be a farm that is prone to flooding, or that has very light soils that are prone to drought. Oftentimes these are the same farm. And if you have a farm number that's like that, let's say it's in a river bottom on some sand, and it's very common for you to get completely wiped out, I think the ARC individual could be a very good fit, because you could get wiped out and the county could be completely fine. And then the ARC individual will be better protecting your individual risk. But just one thing to keep in mind, though, is that with the ARC individual, you're only getting paid on 65% of base acres versus 85% of base acres with the ARC County. A few other items. All producers on the same farm must choose the same program. So if you farm 50-50 with a landlord, both of you have to pick the same program. If you do nothing and just choose not to go into the FSA office, your farm will default to PLC. You'll have nothing for the 2014 crop year, and for all future crop years you will default to PLC. This would not be advised. Doing nothing would not be advised. Adjusted gross income limitation. If you have made on average $900,000 over the last 3 years, on average, each individual year on average over $900,000, you do not qualify for any farm bill payments. Some key deadlines: February 27th to update yield history and or reallocate base acres. Again, individual yields only matter for PLC and ARC individual. However, we do recommend that all update. And seed corn can use commercially equivalent yields not to exceed 120% of the county average. And reallocating base acres, as we mentioned, makes sense if it can increase your corn base. March 31st, one-time election of either ARC or PLC, covering the 2014 through 2018 crop years. This is a look at what the yield collection form looks like. This is for one of my farms. These are my yields going back to 2008, and we are happy to fill out these forms for you if we have your yields that you've been turning in for crop insurance. If you work with us in that capacity, we have your numbers. We're happy to fill these forms out for you. We'll then just email them or give them back to you, and you can turn them into the FSA office, and then they will give you a form that looks like this. And this form does two things. It allows you to reallocate your acres, and it also allows you to update your yields. So at the top part, this is my farm. I can either keep the existing base acres or I can update them. The current base acres have a little bit of, or mostly corn and a little bit of oats. Or, since I didn't grow any oats in the 2008 to 2012 time period, I can update this farm number to all corn, which is something I obviously chose to do. And that's that part. And then down here is the yield update. I'm not sure why they didn't put in what my old yield was, but it turns out the new yield that I turned in was higher than the old yield. So over here it shows giving me the opportunity to update it. So the 173 represents 90% of my 2008 through 2012 average. And this form must be signed by at least one landowner. Okay, so This is not signed by the producer on the farm, but rather the landowner. This form, 857 then, is the form where you choose either ARC or PLC. So on this farm I chose to go with ARC County, and my only base acreage on this farm is corn, so that's really the only crop that matters for this farm number. And that's an important thing to understand. Even if I turn around and plant soybeans on that farm this year, my payments are made as though that farm has corn on it, because again, it's based on the base acres, the historical plantings, not what I did that year. Now this form, this one really surprised me when I got into this. All producers must sign this form. So if you are the only producer listed on a rented farm, the landowner does not need to sign. So for instance, this farm I actually own, but then I have another farm that I rent. And I am the only producer listed on that farm. There's no CRP in the landowner's name, or no waterways in the waterway programs or anything like that. And I'm the only producer listed on it. So that means that I was able to enroll that farm in either ARC or PLC, and the landowner did not have to sign the form. Now I have a 5-year lease on my farm, so it pretty much covers the whole farm bill, so it really is irrelevant. However, most farms, many rented farms I should say, do not have a 5-year lease that covers the whole farm bill. A lot of them would be rented year to year, or 2 or 3 year leases, whatever. And it really surprised me that the government is allowing the producer on the farm to encumber that farm really in a 5-year program, and the landowner does not have to consent. So, but that is indeed the case, and it's kind of surprising, but that's how it works. Now, however, if there's a little bit of CRP on that farm number, and the landowner is listed as a producer, well then the landowner is also going to need to sign, because they're also a producer. We've put a decision tool out on our website, so if you go to agperspective.com, you can click there on the left hand side for ARC and PLC analysis tool. And what you'll actually be doing is downloading an Excel spreadsheet. And the actual spreadsheet, when you pull it up, will look like this. And if you want to, for instance, look at corn payment forecasting, if you click on the middle button, that's going to take you to this sheet. The top part here, the orange boxes, you'll put in the information for your farm, what state you're in, county, number of payment entities your farming operation qualifies for at the FSA. Then you can put in your farm's PLC payment yield, and then the ARC benchmark yield is calculated automatically for your county. Then in these orange boxes you can put in your estimates, what you think price is going to do over the 2014 through 2018 crop years. And based on those estimates, down below here, a per acre payment analysis will be computed. So for the 2014 crop year, based on the $390 that we had estimated above, pays $89.87 as we've discussed. PLC would not pay anything because we're not below $370. Based on these numbers that I have entered in there right now, as you can see, ARC would be a clear winner in this scenario over PLC. This shows the cumulative payout over a 5-year period. However, if you start putting numbers in here below that 315 area that we discussed, you're going to quickly see that PLC starts to win. So this is just another way for you to be able to look at the two products head to head and put in some of your own price estimates. Now this tab is another tab, or this sheet is another tab in the spreadsheet. And with this one you can drill into the individual crop year. So this one allows you to take a look at the 2014 crop year and do some what-if scenarios just within one crop year. Very similar to what we showed you earlier. If we were forecasting $390 for a price, we think we're 10 bushel above average, pay out $70, and that's kind of the different what-if scenarios you can do with that. Alright, just a little bit about crop insurance. There were some aspects of crop insurance that were incorporated into the 2014 Farm Bill. The first one being that crop insurance is now linked to conservation compliance. If you do not have a current conservation plan, the producer has 5 years to comply with an approved plan. This would be on farms and
soil types that require a conservation plan. If you are in violation, you have 2 years to become compliant. Now, this doesn't mean that you couldn't buy crop insurance. This just means that you wouldn't qualify for the subsidy that crop insurance has. The second one here is for beginning farmers. They'll receive an extra 10% premium subsidy. So who is a beginning farmer? A beginning farmer is someone that's been farming 5 years or less, and years in college or the military do not count. So for instance, if you have somebody that's been farming 8 years, but 4 of those years they were in college, they would still qualify as a beginning farmer to receive this extra 10% premium subsidy. Another change is that, not really a change, actually they just made permanent the increased crop insurance subsidy for enterprise units. A fairly significant change is that they will now allow you to insure your irrigated and non-irrigated enterprise units separately. This means that they will both stand on their own for loss determination. This is a really big deal for those of you that have irrigated and non-irrigated ground. You also then can insure your irrigated and non-irrigated ground at differing coverage levels. So that wraps up our 2014 Farm Bill discussion. I want to thank you for taking the time to listen in. And if you have any questions, please feel free to give our office a call or you can email me directly. Thank you. Bye.